Okay, hi everyone. This is Adrian Frez, the CEO and founder of Modern Guild. I'm more importantly here by the man that you see in the video, Aaron Goldberg, head of University Relations for Citi. Obviously, the purpose of tonight's call is to walk you guys through a little bit around the Superday logistics for Citi, but also, more importantly, give you some tips about interview success. So with that, I want to quickly introduce Aaron, who's going to walk you guys through probably about 15 to 20 minutes of kind of slides, and really the purpose is to make this as interactive as possible. So any questions that you have, feel free to ask. I think what we'll try and do is unmute the line for every participant at the end of this. That way you can ask your questions and mute either your audio or your computer to ask your question. But if that gets a little bit unruly, we'll use the chat box in the, hopefully you see it in the top and part of your screen, and you can chat your question when we open it up for questions after the 15-20 minutes of presentation. Hopefully that works for everyone right now. Again, we're all on mute just to get to at least the presentation part. But I'll hand it over to Aaron right now.
Hey guys, how's it going? As Adrian said, my name is Aaron, and hopefully I look familiar to at least a few of you as I spend a good chunk of my year on campus at various student conferences. So I'm really excited to be talking to you. Thank you so much for being part of our Modern Guild program in partnership with Adrian and his team. We're super excited about the program and to have you all as part of it. And I hope to see every one of you in August at our Super Days, and really hope to see many more of you next summer for internships and eventually back full time. That's what this is all about. So with that, I will jump in. Adrian, can you put the slide over? Maybe with the arrows. Yep. Perfect. Awesome. So why don't we kick off with a quote from Mike Corbat, our CEO. And this is something that we talk about all the time at Citi, which is that diversity is not just something that we do because it's the right thing to do. I mean, it is the right thing to do. For Citi, being such an incredibly global organization, diversity of thought, diversity of background is integral to our business. You know, we're a trust-based business. We can't do business without our clients believing in who we are and what we do, and without sharing values and interests and goals. And so diversity is an incredibly important part of our business strategy, and not just because we want to look good in the press or because shareholders are asking us to. When you operate a global business, diversity is at the very core of your people strategy, because at the end of the day, if our clients don't trust us, we don't speak the same language, both literally and figuratively, we're not going to get done what we need to get done. We won't be able to serve our clients in the right way. So I hope going into this, you all appreciate that the firm that you've chosen to align yourself with through this process is absolutely dedicated to building a diverse workforce, not just for the sake of doing so, but because we need diversity of thought as we move forward into the future of financial services. And so, today's talk, I think we can click over to the agenda, I think is the next slide. Basically we're going to talk about the Summer Analyst Program, which is a fantastic opportunity for us to get to know you and you get to know us. And then we'll jump into sort of interview in terms of what the heck do you need to be doing right now to make sure in August, when you have the opportunity to talk with us, that you're as successful as possible. And the truth is that the program, Modern Guild and Adrian's support, is going to give you an incredible amount of preparation, more preparation than most people will ever get. And so we're really confident in your ability to perform really well in the interview. We think many of you will be really successful, and honestly, I hope you're all successful. And look, as I said, we really want to see all of it at Citi next summer. From there, we'll talk about our leadership standards, which is important because it says a lot about what Citi stands for and our values, but also because that is sort of one of the yards, one of the measurement tools that we look at during the interview process. A lot of firms talk about fit, right? And fit is a little bit of a dangerous concept because sometimes fit can mask bias. But I think by laying the leadership standards out for you, you can see sort of what you're being decked against when it comes to assessing whether you would do well at Citi and whether Citi is the right place to do in the long term. And from there, we'll talk about the actual selection process. We'll talk about our Superday model, and then we'll take questions. And when it comes to questions, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you are curious about. It can be related to the content that we're talking about. You can ask me questions about business or the industry or really anything that your heart desires. I'm here to help, and any question is a good question.
So before we move on to the next slide, I just want to make a quick gut check, make sure everyone can see the presentation clearly. That's large on your screen. If someone can confirm in the chat box, I'd appreciate it. Okay, great. Looks like everything's working well. Thank you.
Cool. So this is the overview of our summer analyst program. And summer analyst experience is a fantastic way to learn about Citi. Citi will become your classroom for that 10 weeks. It'll start with a week of training. Right? We'll get you right in the door, right into training. That training will be facilitated classroom style that first week, but really the whole program is training. You'll spend 9 weeks following the first week of classroom training. You'll spend 9 weeks on the desk, working with your group, participating in the business, working on live deals, pitches, proposals, transactions, everything that goes on at Citi you will be a part of. I think one of the most important things to understand about a successful summer analyst is that successful summer analysts don't shadow, right? This is not an opportunity to watch what happens at Citi. This is an opportunity to be a part of it and drive the process and look at everything you possibly can about the business, about the group, about the culture. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is an opportunity, like I said, for you to get to know us and us to get to know you, and hopefully you like what you see, and we like working with you, and we're able to make that full-time offer at the end of the summer. So 10 weeks to get as much out of the experience as possible. You will get a mentor. In most businesses, you get a senior mentor and a junior mentor, and both of those folks serve different purposes. So the junior mentor is all about sort of all the day-to-day questions that you're going to be curious about. And junior mentors are huge because junior mentors are allies. They are usually analysts or associates. They're usually from the school that you went to, and they're there to help. And so the junior mentor is somebody that you talk to all the time. The senior mentor will probably be a director or a managing director in the business, probably somebody that has been at Citi for a long time or in the industry for a long time. And they are there to be sort of your North Star to help you answer the big questions. What are you doing here? What should you be thinking about? What should you be learning? Where are you in terms of your overall process and your full-time offer, and how are you being viewed by your other team members? Senior mentors have lots of experience because they themselves have so much experience in business and are really valuable. The networking and lunch and learns are all about making the most out of the experience. One of the things that we tell a lot of our summer analysts is that you should very rarely eat lunch alone. There'll be a lot of facilitated lunch and learns where you'll have speakers come in, their senior managing directors, business heads, product heads, regional heads, share their experience with you and to spend some time talking about their view on career and building a career at Citi. But a lot of that will happen proactively from you. You'll be there to network and meet people. You'll have the sort of school network where you're coming from and other affinity groups. And so a lot of the time as a summer analyst is really exploring what people do and how they do it. finally, placement process does vary by business, as the slide says, but ultimately that is the goal. Citi does not overhire interns, and so our goal is to bring as many of you back full time after the summer analyst experience, and that's really powerful. So I think we can move forward from there. Great. So basically, when we talk about having a successful interview, there are a couple things they need to know. And we tried to lay that out here. And we'll start in the lower sort of quadrant. Know the job and know Citi, right? Many of you have already sort of expressed business interest, and you'll have the opportunity to confirm that interest. But really what we should be doing now through the Modern Guild program is getting to understand, what does a banking analyst do? What does a markets analyst do? What does a capital markets analyst do? What happens in our treasury business? Right? Understanding what an analyst actually does, what makes an analyst successful, is a huge part of the interview process, right? Because at some point, someone is going to ask you a really simple question, which is why? Why are you here? Why Citi? Why are you interested in doing this work? And if you don't actually understand what that work is and what that person does in that seat, it's going to be hard to answer that question. You also have to know Citi, right? Understand our firm, understand what makes our firm different. A lot of people, when they talk about Citi, they talk about globality. Lots of reasons why we want to do Citi, and we'll talk about how you can get prepared to answer that question. Know the players, right? Know about the industry, know about the economy from a macro perspective. Talk a little bit about how you can do that as well. Know the technicals, right? Which in your case is probably a little bit of an overstatement. I think you want to have familiarity with the technicals. Because we want to test your genuine interest in our business, and part of that is understanding what are the technical aspects of the business, what are the processes, how do we sort of look at companies and the market, how do we create value for certain things, valuations for certain things, and finally, and I think most importantly, know your story. Right? That's where you have the power. You have the power to frame your story. Sort of going back to that why question, I think you have to understand why you're in the room. You also have to understand what is your why. Why do you want to work at Citi? The challenge for you is to be able to coherently tell your story and connect that to the opportunity at hand. So, one of the things that you can definitely start doing, if you haven't already, practicing telling your story. Right? Tell it to your family, tell it to your friends, tell it to your dog. Record yourself telling your story. I would suggest that if you get into the interview room, that it's your first time telling your story, you're going to be at a serious disadvantage. Would you mind? Absolutely. So here's what we've laid out as our interview success plan, which sort of encompasses all of the things that we've talked about. So you should be absolutely immersed in what's going on in the economy from a macro perspective, what's going on in financial services, and often they're directly related. Who are the major players, and also what's going on at Citi, right? So, for example, Brexit, right? That may come up in your interviews as a way to sort of understand, are you really interested in what's driving our industry, which is sort of the macroeconomic sort of going on in the world, right? What is the major episodic situations that have caused the market to be more volatile or uncertain? And that's where the reading and the research comes in. We'll talk a little bit in a minute about what to read. But definitely picking 3 or 4 major economic issues and then researching them. Develop a view. You don't have to have an opinion about everything, but having an opinion shows that you have a view. And when you're a summer analyst and a full-time analyst, that's really valuable. Talk about or read about what are the opportunities or the issues, the headwinds that are facing our industry. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What's going on in the regulatory environment? There's tons of resources. Certainly setting up some Google alerts, Citi is a strong way to start that way. Google's going to work for you in terms of aggregating a lot of information. And scheduling mock interviews and practicing is super important. This is a skill. It's not something that you wake up and you're good at interviewing. It's a lot of people it's not natural, but the practice is really the work here along with the research. And you see all the resources there. There's a lot more, and I'll talk a little bit also about other things to read. In week 2, start preparing for the technical questions. When it comes to technical skills, I often say that knowing your technicals won't set you apart, but not knowing any of them will. Right? So you have to have a certain understanding of the processes that are involved in banking, credit, risk, valuation, modeling. You don't exactly have to know how to do these things. We're not going to have to expect you to show up in the interview and build up a discounted cash flow. But you should certainly have a grasp of the language. And there's lots of resources, including the mentorship and guidance that you're getting through Modern Guild, but also a ton on the internet about those sort of various processes and technical skills that you should have under your belt. And in week 3, as I said, your story is hugely powerful. Telling your story and connecting that to our business and our opportunities is something that you will absolutely need to do. Because to us, we're really trying to test your interest in working in our business and a long-term career at Citi. And being able to do that by telling your story of the decisions that you've made in your academic career, your personal life, in the extracurricular activities while you're in Modern Guild. That all definitely demonstrates to us, in a very tangible way, your interest in our business. And again, practice is huge there. So, we talked a little bit, in referencing the research part of this, and so these are sort of our recommendations, and that was sort of mirrored on some of the slides earlier. But I think the Wall Street Journal is a fantastic place to start, especially when it comes to getting some of the language under your belt. Would be definitely a good idea, at least a few times a week to open the journal. On the front page, they summarize on the left-hand side all the stuff going on in the world from a macro perspective. And there's the money and investing section. I would read as much as you can about what's going on in the world from a geopolitical perspective, and also what's going on in financial services in terms of deals that are happening, trends, the regulatory environment, what's going on in the markets, currencies, commodities, interest rates. What is the Fed saying? What are other central bank actors doing? There are several phenomena right now going on in the market. You might want to be familiar with negative interest rates, right? Because that's something that only a few years ago nobody even talked about. So a lot of this research ties all together because you're getting the language, you're getting the macro perspective, you're getting to understand the industry and the deal environment. And so whatever you choose to read, just read something. Right? The journal is a great place to start. Financial Times, which is that orangey pink paper that you see people carrying around. People Book, which is a blog in the New York Times and the business section in general. I think periodicals, for me, The Economist is a great source of information. It comes out once a week. It takes me the whole week to read it, but it's a fantastic way to stay smart. And the internet and apps are an amazing way to sort of pull a lot of information together. So, I read Espresso, which is Economist's sort of news aggregator every morning, Google Alerts. Seeking Alpha is an industry publication. They have an app that really covers the deal environment and what's going on in the business world, whereas The Economist is more a macro political perspective. And in terms of the reading list on the bottom, those are suggestions. Those are more, I think those help you better understand maybe the culture of the business. Keep in mind that books are designed to sell and not always sort of exactly how the world works. But I think certainly the journal, Economist, Google Alerts, all really good tools to help you learn the language and also understand what's going on from a macro and political perspective and also within the industry. So a lot of times in the interview, which you'll all be getting to in a couple of weeks, you will encounter behavioral situational interview questions. And they can be kind of difficult. And so you'll know a behavioral or situational interview question, because it'll start usually with something like, tell me about a time, or tell me about a situation, or something where the interviewer is trying to direct you to tell them about a specific instance. And those can be maybe a little bit nervous. Part of the way to prepare for that is to think about sort of situations that you have been in, both at the workplace, at internships, at school. Start to think about sort of a catalog of experience that you've had and you've used to talk about times where you've been in difficult situations, or you had to solve difficult problems, or work with groups of people. Identifying those examples is really important. There's also a method to this madness, because the behavioral interview question, it's not about getting the right answer, it's about demonstrating to an interviewer how you think. So there's a method here that's called the STAR method, right? And it's actually a way to answer this question super effectively. You have to have the examples identified, but if you use the STAR method, you'll really demonstrate to the interviewer that you understand how to organize your thoughts, and that you think analytically, which is something that we're really trying to measure throughout the process. So STAR, pretty straightforward. It stands for situation, task, action, result. And then answering a behavioral or situational question, if you can walk through the answer using that framework, you'll do really well. I can pretty much guarantee it. On the flip side, you don't want to sound like a robot, right? You don't want to be rehearsed. But if you can walk the interview, if somebody says to you, tell me about a time where you had to solve a difficult problem. You lay out, here's the situation. We had this problem. It was really challenging because X, Y, and Z. We identified that we had to do the following to solve it, and these are the actions that we took. And work that we did resulted in this problem being solved in a really efficient way, right? Or whatever the scenario dictates. And I think it's also perfectly okay when you get a behavioral or situational question to ask the interviewer for a few seconds, 30 seconds, to think about it and maybe sketch it out in your head a little bit. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it's not about a right or wrong answer. It's about how you organize yourself and your thinking and your analytical skills. So, this is basically just another overview of what I talked about. I think these are good things to think about, particularly when it comes to results, right? Because outcomes and being able to talk about meeting your objectives and what you learned, right? That last question, what did you learn from this experience? How do you use the learning since? That's maybe one of the most powerful things you can do, is beyond just telling the results were, but really what the difference that you made was, and how you've been able to incorporate that learning into everything that you do in your academic life and your professional life. That's really sort of the pro level of the situational or behavioral question. Right, so we're moving to the next section of getting ready for the interview, which is specific to Citi. Right, these are our leadership standards. So it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but this is what we look for in leaders, right? They develop our people, even if it's not a manager. Empowering your team, putting your team in a great position, being a strong part of a team is a huge part of being in Citi. Driving value for our clients, that's probably what makes us successful. Everything that we do, everything that we think about has to be thought of in the context of, is this right for our client? Is this fitting for our client? Is this good for our client? As I said, when we talked about why diversity is so important to Citi, right? This is a trust-based business, and if our clients don't believe that we value the relationship and that we're constantly working hard to create value for them in the relationship, then they will take that relationship elsewhere. And so our global expertise, our global platform, our global knowledge, our diversity of thought, all of that is focused on driving value for our clients. Working as a partner is huge as well. Oftentimes in Citi, we talk about it's not what you do, but how you do it. Because the what you do is probably not that complicated, right? Build a financial model, all people will start to practice, and you'll realize that once you understand the process, it's not incredibly, it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery, but how you do it, and building relationships and challenging people around you and challenging yourself listening, understanding how dialogue works. That is huge at Citi because it's an incredibly collegial place. We're extremely competitive outside of the firm and extremely collegial inside of the firm. And that's one of the aspects of our culture that sets us apart. Progress is something that you hear about a lot at Citi. We want to be champions for progress in the communities that we work in the workplace, with our clients. If you guys watch TV, you'll actually notice that Citi is running a huge ad campaign called Progress Makers, where we talk about the progress that we've made over 200 plus years of history, and that's a theme you'll see across the board. And a lot of that also pertains to change, right? Our business is constantly changing. The environment is constantly changing. Being a champion of that change really will put you in a position to be successful. Obviously, living our values is huge. Trust is a license to do business, as I've said several times. We have to lead by example. We have to do what's right for our clients. And sometimes we have to have the courage to speak up in situations where we've made mistakes. And living our values obviously makes us who we are. And finally, we wouldn't be able to talk about our standards if we didn't talk about delivering results. That's a day-to-day perspective, that's a quarter-to-quarter perspective, for year-to-year as well. Setting measurable expectations is huge. You can only manage what you measure, as a lot of folks in business say. Meeting and exceeding those expectations is integral, along with living our values and having an ethical orientation and an execution orientation. So the leadership standards are important for you to know because as you go through the interview process, people are going to be listening to you and asking you questions that hopefully reveal that you excel, or able to demonstrate that you excel when it comes to these leadership standards that these also are part of your values as well. It makes us who we are. So this is the section that you're probably all really interesting to know about, which is what are you about to experience? As I said before, the preparation that you're getting through Modern Build is an absolute huge advantage for you. The technical skills, the soft skills, the learning that you're getting here from your mentors, and your buddies, and from Adrian and his team are going to set you apart as candidates. And so we expect, I'm very confident that many of you will be receiving offers shortly. But in order to do so, you're going to have to go through the Superday process. And the Superday process is really a fancy way of saying we want to get to know you. And that's really how you should look at it. And this Superday process is something that we're really proud of. It's something we've been working on for a while. And we're rolling this out citywide. It's very new to us. Here's how it's going to work. You're going to participate in up to 5 different assessments. You're going to come in the morning. When you arrive, we're going to give you a case study. You're going to get a case overview, a document that's going to ask you, essentially give you a whole scenario and pose some questions to you. You're going to have 50 minutes, almost an hour, to sit down with that case study, read it over, start to think about it, draw some conclusions from that case. One of the things to really understand about the case, just like with a situational behavioral interview question, there is no right or wrong answer in this case study. It's all about your view. It's about your analysis. It's about your ability to think critically and analytically, and also your ability to discuss those conclusions and to present. So after that 15-minute period, reviewing the case study and doing your analysis, you move into the interview portion, where you'll have 4 different interviews. 2 of those interviews will be competency-based, right? One of them will focus on your leadership skills, and the other will focus on your work experience and your background. Both of those competency-based interview sessions will focus on the leadership standards as part of that, and it will give you the opportunity to talk about who you are, what your story is, what you're passionate about, and to pull examples from your background, right? Whether it's about leadership or about your professional academic experience. We want to understand who you are and what you're about. And those 2 interviews are really the opportunity to tell that story and in the beginning of the presentation, I showed you that slide of the bubbles, right? Know the job, know Citi, know the industry, know the players, know your story, right? That's where this all comes out. The next interview that you'll have, it may not necessarily be in this order, but for the purposes of this conversation, the next interview will focus on technical skills. And it's not necessarily, can you build this kind of cash flow? It's really, what is your motivation for working at Citi? Can you demonstrate to us that you're naturally curious and you've invested time in understanding our business? How do we look at companies? How does the market? What drives the market? What's going on right now in the market? What's going on in banking, in M&A? Is it a hot M&A environment, or is there a lot of volatility and uncertainty that's causing the M&A environment to cool off a little bit? And a lot of that you'll get from doing your research and talking to your mentors. But you want to have a good understanding of some of the major technical concepts around basic accounting, cash flow, valuation. These are big sort of high-level concepts that will serve you across the various aspects of banking and financial services. So again, you don't need to be nervous that you don't know everything about banking. When you join, both as a summer and full-time, we'll teach you everything you need to know. But we're really trying to, as a specialist, understand your engagement with our business and your interest in our business, your motivation for working at Citi, through all the research that you've done and curiosity that you naturally have as someone who's really motivated to work in our space. Finally, the fourth interview will actually be your case study presentation. So as I said, you'll have had about a little bit less than an hour, about 15 minutes to review the case. You'll then be positioned in an interview with someone who is familiar, obviously, with the case. You'll have 10 minutes to present your conclusions from that case study. And then you'll have another about 10 or 15 minutes to discuss the case study with the interviewer. The interviewer will have the opportunity to ask questions on your analysis and conclusion, and probe a little bit about why you think what you think. Now, finally, you may also participate in a group exercise. Each business is allowed to make a decision on whether they want to include a group exercise in the Superday process. And so if you participate in a group exercise, it will be largely based on the case study that you've already spent 50 minutes analyzing and already spent another 25, 30 minutes discussing with your interviewer in that case study presentation interview. And so at this point, you'll be pretty well versed in the case. The addition of the group exercise will ask you to solve a new problem with a group of people. And as you can probably sort of intuit or understand, again, it's not about finding the right answer to the question. Group exercise is an opportunity for us to see how you work together, to see your leadership skills, to see your ability to negotiate potentially difficult situations. We want to see how you integrate with people and how you add value to that group exercise. So if I can be a little bit blunt, my advice would not to be a jerk. Don't be a jerk in the group exercise. But I'm sort of being facetious. You understand that it's about seeing how you work with others and in teams. Group work and Citi is just an incredibly team-oriented place. There's very little that you'll do alone as a summer analyst and full-time recruiter at Citi. And so working in groups is obviously huge to what we do in our success. So that's the end of the presentation. I think I talked for way too long as it is. I'm happy to open up for questions. Like I said at the beginning, you can ask whatever you want, whether it's related to material we cover or about Citi or the market or the industry, and I'll do my best to give you a reasonably good answer.
Just give us 1 second. We're going to exit the presentation so that we can try and unmute the line for everyone. We'll see if that works. Great. So now we're in conversation mode, guys. I'm going to unshare. Can you guys hear us? Okay, so if you guys are on right now, please mute your phones or mute your screen. screen on your computer, and this is an opportunity to ask questions to Aaron. So if anybody has a question, feel free to start off. So as everyone thinks about their question, let me start off with a question that is on everyone's mind. I have a feeling. So Aaron, the question I have is around some of the logistics of Superday. I know obviously everyone's probably anxious to better understand the dates and how that's all going to work. And I know Citi obviously pros at this and all this, but can you just walk us through kind of the next 2 or 3 weeks timeline?
So I believe on July 27th, somewhere around July 27th, after the analyst panel, which is next week, we're going to ask you to confirm your business interests. I saw William, you had chatted some questions, so I'm sure that as well. So we're going to ask you to confirm your business interests. From there, you'll be connected to one of our recruiters who recruits for that line of business. And they're all great people, and they all definitely want you to succeed, and they're going to take great care of you. From there, we're going to hold preparatory calls, prep calls for each line of business. So if you say I'm interested in investment banking, corporate banking, or sales and trading, or the capital markets, each one of those recruiters will run a call to help you get a little bit more prepared for what will happen at Superday. Like I said, there are some variables. Some businesses do group exercise, some don't. Some have slight variations of what I've described in terms of the Superday. And then it may offer you some additional advice, sort of like I shared, on how to best prepare. You can also feel free on that question to ask a ton of questions on that prep call. From there, you'll get scheduled for the Superday. I believe they will happen the week August 15th to 19th. You'll get the exact dates from the recruiter after you get connected to that recruiter. And we'll also set up all the travel and hotels and logistics that you need if you're traveling for the Superday. And that process, the travel and logistics process happens a little bit later than what you probably experience in your personal life. Usually you try and buy a plane ticket, a good couple of weeks before you're trying to fly. In our world, we operate on a little bit shorter timeline, so don't be alarmed if you haven't been contacted for travel up until even potentially a few days before the Superday itself. We'll try and get as much of that done as possible ahead of time. But like I said, don't be alarmed if you don't have a flight, a week before, because we turn these things around pretty quickly. You'll then get specific instructions for your day of, usually at least a day or two before the Superday. They'll tell you where to go and where to meet. Obviously, dress code is something that you should be talking about with your mentor and in Modern Guild. Business formal is usually a pretty safe bet. And you go from there. You may or may not find out who exactly you're meeting beforehand. Oftentimes, a lot of the recruiters prefer not to disclose who the Superday interviewers will be. That's really for the purpose of making sure that it's a very open and objective environment. In terms of the dates, like I said, August 15th to 19th is what we're looking at, depending by business. And obviously, a lot of you have been in touch with Crystal if you have conflicts. She'll continue to be a point of contact for you to work out any date issues or logistics issues, so we can make sure that you're all set and ready to go. So hopefully that answered a lot of questions around logistics. Is there anything that I missed that you want to talk about?
No, I think that's right. I'm just going to give a quick summary, right, just to make sure everyone has key moments, right? So next week, what Aaron referenced was the Day in the Life Analyst Panel. So you guys will be getting, as typical on the Sunday newsletter information. That's going to be a panel of different analysts at Citi from different divisions talking about their experiences. The idea that is after that panel, you'll have the opportunity to either reconfirm the sectors you're most interested in or possibly change sectors. So we'll collect information, assign you to your recruiter who will then reach out. So next week, start thinking about that, make sure you're comfortable with what the sector you're aligned with, whether it's right now, call it consumer investment banking, CFO, capital markets origination, or sales and trading market, and so forth. And then someone will reach out to you and start coordinating the logistics. I think the key thing to mention is that originally, most of you have heard about Superday being on August 12th, Friday, August 12th. Now, obviously, we're talking about pushing it out to the following week. Simply that means is that over the coming days, we'll confirm those dates or periods the next week so that you can kind of plan accordingly. So you should be pretty much reserving or being as comfortable as possible that week. If you have conflicts that week, please reach out to Crystal directly. If you need her contact information because you don't have it for whatever reason, feel free to reach out to the Modern Guild team and we'll supply it.
Great. What other questions do you have? Like I said, I'm really happy to answer any question whether it's related to this process or otherwise.
Hi, Aaron. This is Miranda. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay. Thanks so much for giving this talk. And I really felt like a lot of the points that you touched on were so important. But if it would be possible, can I ask you to talk a little bit more about the group exercise that you mentioned at the very end? So Modern Guilds prepared us a lot for the competency, for the technicals, and for the case study. But for the group exercise, I feel like that's a little bit of a surprise to me at least. And I'd love to hear a bit more about how exactly you perform well in a group setting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the key things to emphasize about the group exercise is that not all of the businesses do it, right? So it is a little bit of a wild card. Some of the businesses really like to do it. Some of the businesses don't like to do it. So it's not a thing that will be guaranteed. Once you confirm your area of interest, get connected with a recruiter, then you'll really start to get an understanding of will you participate in group exercise. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the group exercise is testing your collaboration skills. Right? You'll be presented with a question or a problem related to the case study that will require you to work with a group of people that you may have just met, let's say, to solve a problem or come up with a recommendation to solve a problem. And there will be both recruiters and people from the business who you've already met through the interview process who will sit in with you on that group exercise. They'll participate a little bit. There might be some surprises along the way. The case might change a little bit suddenly because that's how our business works. They'll be sort of looking at not necessarily what you do, but how you do it. Are you a team player? Are you open to new ideas? Are you someone who takes the leadership role in the group, or are you someone who sits back and lets things sort of happen a little bit? There's no, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. And there's no right or wrong way to participate in the case study. Obviously, you're cognizant of the fact that it's being watched, right? So there are certain things that we're looking for, and you could probably sort of, based on what I'm saying, and your own intuition, understand that Citi, which is a place that's built on collaboration, that we want people who understand how to work with other people who may or may not have the same point of view as that. And so I think the best way to get prepared is to think about sort of when it comes to teamwork, what is your sort of mode of operation? Are you a natural leader? Are you someone that waits and listens? Are those challenging situations for you? And start to plan how you think you want to approach that situation. The thing about it is that you really can't plan too much. You don't want to get robotic about it, and you don't want to over-plan and sort of psych yourself out. The group exercise should feel, and I know this is maybe a little bit funny, but should feel as natural as possible. Because we really want to understand, how do you integrate into teams and how do you solve problems, how do you communicate, what is your style of communication. It's really an opportunity for you to demonstrate who you are and what you believe in. And so if you think about the leadership standards that we went over, Again, we're looking at, do you excel in some of those areas? So I hope that answers your question. You can sort of keep pushing
Aaron, this is Aaron. Just to follow up on that question, is there anything more granular you can explain about how the group interview will be structured or what the outcome of the group exercise is? Is it a verbal presentation? Is it a written presentation?
Yeah.
How does that work?
It depends on the case and the business. But I would definitely anticipate at the end of the group exercise having to either summarize or present to the interviewers your conclusions as a group, right? And they'll be with you the whole time, so it won't be like they'll walk in and suddenly you'll have to make a formal presentation. But I would anticipate having to, let's say the group exercise is 45 minutes, right? Spending the first 20 minutes sort of sitting down with the group, reviewing the case, brainstorming potential solutions, maybe listing them aloud, then going through a process of maybe deciding what the optimal solutions are, and going through sort of the pros and cons of the solutions that you're suggesting. And then the final phase of sort of solidifying what your recommendations are and communicating those back. I can guarantee along the way that there will be some surprises. The case may change a little bit. The client may ask for something different. There could be a snowstorm that changes your meeting. The group exercise is designed to also see how you as a group and as an individual react through a real world situation, because there's so few deals in Citi that start and end with the same variables. That's not real life. Climate change, news change, the market changes. As we've seen this summer with Brexit as a big example. If you look at the change to the British pound and the way that's changed how companies hedge currency risk, that's real life, and the group exercise will have an element of that real variability.
Great, thanks, Aaron. I'm just going to ask everyone to remember to put their phone or their computer on mute if not talking, and then open it up to anyone who has a question. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Hey, Aaron, this is Javier Perez. Thanks so much for hosting this. It's been really helpful. I had a quick question in regards to the competency-based interviews. Will they both be behavioral? Or is there a difference between the intention of each of the competency-based interviews?
Generally, they will be different. One will probably be focused on your work experience and background, right? So work experience and background interview tends to be the best opportunity for you to demonstrate your interest in our business. You want to talk about the choices that you've made over the course of your academic life and professional experience. We want people who, we don't want people to look at an analyst program at Citi as a job, right? We want people who look at this as a career and an opportunity to start something great. And so the work experience and background interview sort of helps you build your story and your case as to why financial services in Citi is the best choice for you. In terms of the leadership skills competency interview, that's all about how you, not what you do, but how you do it. And that's going to be a lot of situational and behavioral questions, talking about situations that you've been in where you have to demonstrate leadership skills. How do you think about leadership? How do you think leadership applies to the workplace? It's going to give you an opportunity to talk about your values and who you are, and then connect that back to the experience that you've had over time. They may draw on other elements of the competencies we covered in the leadership skills, but I would say they probably would focus on those two big buckets. So hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was a question from the chat that I saw that flashed up. I didn't get a chance to look at it though.
So this is a question from Mary. Can I ask ask you if the case interview will be solely presentation style or will there be a case in management consulting style. So I guess, Mary, I'm going to throw that back to you for a second just to understand the clarification between the difference between presentation style and management consulting style, because to me, as an ex-consultant, I would argue they're the same thing. I just want to make sure that we understand your question correctly so that we answer it correctly. Mary, are you on the line? So Mary, do you mind unmuting yourself and clarifying what you're asking between the presentation style versus the management consulting style? I think the short answer, just to describe it again, is that the case you're doing with Citi is purely verbal.
Yeah, so I think I understand your question. We're not going to ask you to synthesize data and present it graphically. You're not going to be necessarily doing a PowerPoint presentation. I think the idea behind the case study interview is to look at how you think and to understand your analytical skills. A little bit of faculty envelope, basic math might be involved, but it's not going to be algorithms and calculus. You're going to be given a case study that focuses probably on a company and a situation, and we're going to ask you to answer a few questions about that situation and then essentially make some recommendations on how you might approach solving a problem on behalf of a client. It won't require a tremendous amount of financial skills or technical skills. It's more going to be focused on analytical skills. And so you have 50 minutes, like I said, by yourself to read the case and analyze it and start to draw your conclusions. And then once you get into the case interview itself, which is about 25 to 30 minutes, first 10 minutes will be you presenting the case and your conclusions, and you can choose to approach that presentation which really makes sense to you and to the case. And then you'll have another 10 to 15 minutes to have dialogue with the interviewer. And the interviewer will have some questions for you about the case, maybe ask you to think about it in a different way, or maybe change the variables a little bit. But that will be dialogue based. So I think about the first 10 minutes as you presenting the story and the case and your conclusions, and the next 10 to 15 minutes as an open dialogue between you and the interviewer about the case and the solutions that you presented and potentially alternative ways of looking at the scenario based on the interviewer's sort of questions and point. But I think it should be very conversational in nature. And I think, again, no right or wrong answer. Really, it's about showing your work. If you think about going back to math class, we want to see how you think. We want to understand how you present. Because at the end of the day, one of the things we often talk about is when we're interviewing someone who answers some basic questions. Someone answers some basic questions about, can you do, do we trust you? Can we put you in front of a client? Do you understand the work? And that all leads into it.
So guys, just really quickly before we go to Alejandra, just to summarize, right, what I just heard from putting on my ex-consultant hat, right, since the questions are consulting cases. This is the same as saying, very much similar to a strategic case type of interview. It's a strategy mini case, maybe a little more detailed. The big difference compared to perhaps the case prep that you guys have done to some degree is that you're getting the case well in advance. Right, you're getting 50 minutes to digest, while in a normal consulting style case, you're getting information for 3 minutes, and you start pounding questions back after you take your 2-3 minutes to think. You ask questions to the interviewer, you start trying to understand stuff better and better. So that's probably the dialogue part that Aaron's talking about, right? So you're going to go in, you'll have a certain set of assumptions, you read a lot of information, you'll be able to present some information, and then that's where maybe those questions will come up where you start saying, okay, that's interesting. I didn't look at it this way. Let me keep thinking. So very much similar to the typical consulting strategic style, which obviously all of you went through, I think it's a weekend ago, and have had some access to last night in that workshop with Emily Adams, the Master Consulting Case Coach. Awesome. So, Alejandro, you had a question about at any point will we be interviewed on brain teaser?
That's a great question.
Brain teaser.
You get that question a lot, and the answer is most likely no. Right? I think brain teasers are a little bit controversial, right? Because we don't really, there's no real evidence to show that somebody with cancers of brain teaser will make a great banker. But if you do, don't panic, right? Generally, a brain teaser is an opening or an opportunity, again, to demonstrate your analytical thinking skills. You know, so if someone asks you a brain teaser, which again will in all likelihood not happen, my advice would be to talk it out, right? To demonstrate that you can organize your thoughts and in the question.
Guys, remember to mute your phones, please.
So in terms of the, you know, in short, brain teaser, probably not. If it does happen, don't panic, talk it out. You know, most of the time when you get a brain teaser, the interviewer is looking for a certain type of approach rather than a certain answer, right? So, for example, if I was interviewing one of you or all of you, and I asked you how many street lights are there in Manhattan, right? I probably want you to go down the path of thinking about Manhattan as a grid, right? And you can start to analyze the grid and start to count the number of intersections in the grid. If there's a light at each intersection, that can lead you to an answer. Right? So it's not, you know, you don't need to come up with the answer, which I don't know. You also need to, sort of similar to the group exercise, case study, or even a situational or behavioral interview question, organize your thoughts as analytical as possible and demonstrate that you have a certain amount of creativity and perseverance in that situation, and you'll do great. The other answer, which is let me Google that for you, is probably not a good one, but funny if you want to demonstrate your sense of humor.
So does anybody have another question? And you can unmute your line and ask a question or put it in the chat box. Either way works. So the floor is yours. I want to be conscious of Aaron's time, so perhaps we can take one, maybe two more questions. So go ahead, guys.
Hi, this is Miranda again. Thank you so much for your earlier response about the group exercise. I'd like to ask a bit more about the 50 minutes given to analyze the case. Will we be told explicitly before we're given or when we're given the case what we should be looking for, or is there like a general guideline for what we should be trying to do or to summarize in these 50 minutes?
Yeah, so the case study that you're given will present you with questions for a scenario. It'll be very clear what we're looking for. And the thing about the case study, and if you've gone through what Adrian referenced in terms of preparation for the consulting strategy case study, you're going to be really well prepared because the case study is not designed to trick you. It's not about figuring out who unlocks the magical answer. It's really sort of trying to assess how you think and analytical skills. And so you'll get it. And my guess is that you're going to be very well prepared and you will think probably that it's rather simple. I don't want you to be overconfident. I do want you to understand that it will be very clear to you what we're looking for in terms of your analysis of the case and what we're trying to solve for in that case. And you also have the opportunity to ask a few questions. And so I look at it very much as an opportunity to demonstrate your analytical skills, your creative thinking, presentation skills, and to ask some great questions when it comes to the interview. So I think you'll all be really well prepared for it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. If you do have a question, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, what I'll say is that if you do have questions that come up, feel free to email info@modernguild.com, and we will collect all the various questions the students have and make sure to pass that along to Aaron and his colleagues to make sure that we get those answers. So if you do have any questions right now, feel free to quickly ask. Otherwise, feel free to shoot us an email and we'll make sure to get answers to those questions. So the final curtain call, are there any other questions? Okay, great. It looks like we're all done here, guys. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, guys. You're going to do great. Enjoy the rest of your time in Modern Guild, and I will see you at Citi soon. Thanks, guys.